We should be.
All good?
We are live. Welcome to the Wood Survival Guide, guys. This is attempt number 2 at me making this work. Welcome to my bedroom. This is my setup, and we've got a very special guest today. This is Raissa Simone, guys.
Hi.
Yeah, she's studying at Concordia, she's getting her PhD, and I figured it's somebody good to talk to explore some complicated ideas. She's studying philosophy, and I think this is going to be a pretty good podcast because of this. So, welcome.
Thank you.
How was your day? What'd you do?
My day was good. I hung out with you a bunch. Yeah. Marked a lot of papers, did academia, uh, pretended to be a good student, and TA. That's about what I got up to. Hung out with this puppy.
Do you really find yourself pretending that much? Like it's
I kind of do.
how come?
But I think all academics do. Like, everybody in graduate school has, like, I think hard imposter syndrome. Like, everybody's kind of walking around being like, I don't deserve to be here. I'm not working hard enough. And so I think we're all in that same boat. But I think I feel, I don't know.
Where do you think that imposter syndrome comes from? I don't know if I like so you don't feel like you identify with your student your whimsical student attitude. If you will?
Whimsical student.
Yeah.
No, I think it's that, like, a lot of graduate students sort of feel, uh, I think when people, like, get into any kind of, like, post-undergrad program, the anxiety is that, like, I'm not smart enough to be doing this. This is for the smart kids. I can't be one of the smart kids. And so, like, I think the imposter syndrome comes from that, from, like, having to, like not believing that you deserve to, like, be in this, like, smart kid institution.
Yeah, it's really like more of a self-consciousness. Like,
Yeah.
Oh no, I'm probably not this good.
Yeah.
See, but I've always
Well, it's like anything. Like, I assume, like, comedy has the same thing, where you're like, oh God, do I get to be up here too?
I guess
Golly.
anytime you succeed at something, you kind of have that thought of like, did I earn this? Did I deserve this?
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
can relate to that for sure. But
Yeah.
I always pictured the PhD as something more of like almost like something that if you just worked long enough and hard enough, it would just kind of come anyway. It's like a good skill set, Like if you just don't quit and you just keep giving schools money, eventually you'll get one, right? Like isn't that? I mean, is that like maybe that's like
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. That's like, yeah. that's part of the equation. Yeah. Yeah. No, my dad took like 6 or 7 years to do his PhD. Yeah. If you keep doing the thing, eventually.
Are you saying your dad was slow? Is that what I just caught?
Like, at completing his PhD.
You know we're live right now, right?
Hello, Dad. No, very, very smart, very, like, excellent dissertation that he did. I'm just saying, like, yeah, that shit can take a long time. That happens. Mine will probably take fucking 10 years. Like,
Oh, really?
what am I talking
I
about?
thought you were somewhere near like.
I am. I'm just, like I said, slow as fuck.
Right. So
yeah.
like you're near completion, but you want to take like the last 10%. You want it to take like.
It's like the end of a race.
6
It's like you
years.
run a marathon, and it's always the end when you're just like, fuck, I don't even want to. Like, you wonder why you're still running. You start to, like. Anyway, I feel like the stuff that I'm studying is more interesting than the program, than talking about the nature of academia, which is mostly bureaucratic and stupid.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I guess I talk about the nature of academia because like it seems like such a foreign concept to me. Like I got out so quickly that I'm just like.
You're lucky.
I'm lucky, yeah, because I can't read. Is that why I'm lucky?
Lucky to be illiterate.
But yeah, no, that's an interesting take. That you feel like it's a marathon because like if it's a marathon where you kind of just give up at the end. You're not like that's not exactly a marathon runner, right? You're not gonna do another one after that, right?
Basically.
Yeah, so it feels like a I don't know a strange kind of thought to give it.
Yeah.
But I guess so. Yeah. So, but the nature of academia, like you were saying, is not exactly what we're here to chat about.
No, and
We're
it's
not
sort
really
of a
here to chat
hilarious
about anything
thing.
in particular.
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
It's long as the nature of academia is usually like so not conducive to actually having like
yeah.
to intelligence or like having a creative mind.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I totally agree. Which is like it's interesting that you get somebody like yourself. You know, you've got like a side where you're trying to keep impressed with the academia, keep everybody uptight and on the up and up, and then the other side of you is get high and go to punk shows, and you get to kind of have a good time on that side of life too. You know, where the on the party side of things.
I don't know if that's typical of like all PhD students.
I
That's
would
just
I would doubt
that's
it.
just how
I
I
feel like it
that
depends on what you're
that's
studying.
my clumsy attempt at being a human. I don't know if this is I wouldn't say that's typical of all academics is like study by day, punk shows by night.
Right. Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe I guess it
Not
would depend.
yeah, some.
It would depend. It would depend on like what you were studying, right?
Yeah.
I definitely don't picture. I don't picture any physicists out there fucking hitting the clubs.
You know that now they're gonna like post on this and be like, I am a
Neil
physicist who
deGrasse
is
up here.
in
I'm
a
hitting the
punk
clubs.
band.
I
Excuse me,
run,
Mr. Wood.
I run a punk band called the Quarks, and I think you need to give those physicists some respect.
The Jimmy
Ridiculous.
Neutrons.
This is ridiculous. But yeah, so I guess some of the stuff that we ended up kind of sitting on as far as conversation topics go was you run a poetry club. That
Yeah.
you were telling me about.
Poetry slam.
Poetry slam or slam poetry, if you will.
Yeah.
I don't I don't really even know how to take that most times. I think I've seen it twice. And
You'll come out to the next one. It'll be fun.
I'll come out to the next one. Is that like a command? Is
Yeah.
That, oh well, all right. It's definitely feels like it'd be.
I'm
worth checking
demanding
out.
now. It's yeah.
So
Yeah.
then, all right. So let's start from the beginning then. How'd you get into slam poetry, and what did it do for you when you did get into it?
I got into it by accident mostly. How did I? So I was at Queens. I was still at Queens at the time, at Queens University, and yeah, hadn't done it ever before, and there was somebody had just started a poetry slam in Kingston. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I performed a lot before, so it was sort of this thing because I was like a weird ass theater kid, you know. So I'd done that, and then I also wrote a lot. Um, and so it sort of seemed intuitive, like, oh, this could be a thing I could do, neato. So I go out to this thing, but it turned out to be when they were putting together a team to go to nationals.
Oh,
So I sort of got into it when it was like, ha
the
ha
pressure was
ha,
on.
yeah, and it was, and like I had just started doing it like a month before, like this wasn't like a thing I'd been doing.
Wow, so you really got in early.
Yeah, and then it was like, oh, now you're on the team and going to the nationals. Get your shit together at this thing that you apparently now do. And then like 4 months later, people were like, you're a spoken word artist. I was like, fuck, I started doing this like last spring.
I feel
Like
that's
it was.
like spoken word art is one of those things that it's like one of the only art forms that doesn't take like 10,000 hours.
No,
unless you're counting the hours from when you learn to start speaking.
Like it does take craft, but it was really what was just really bizarre was just sort of like within like a season. Like yeah, it was like from like spring to fall. Um and it was weird because I felt like there were other things I've been doing for years longer and like put more of myself into that uh I wasn't sort of like immediately recognized as like that's the thing you do, but suddenly 4 months of doing this thing and suddenly here I was like, oh, you're a slam poet, you went to the nationals, and I was like, shit, I guess this is the thing I do now. And then the other person who was running the slam in Kingston eventually left, and so I was took over organizing.
You ran the show.
And then I just kind of it's sort of almost like the whole slam poet thing really fell in my lap in a weird way, but it was also like a wonderful thing to happen because I've met like some of the most like some of my best friends, some of those beautiful people I know are some of the most strange and good experiences I've had were within it, but it definitely fell into my lap. It wasn't like I went
Yeah,
out being
so
like, I want to do this.
Yeah, so you stumbled upon it you clearly engaged and immediately kind of connected with it. So it's done something special for you.
Yeah, it definitely it was well it was really weird because yeah, it sort of feels like a cliche to be like and it changed my life, but it did change my 20s. A lot of things wouldn't have happened. like I was sort of able from going to those nationals to do like these little tours, and I was like, oh fuck, I never thought I could be a, like, it catapulted a direction of art that I didn't know that I could or would get into, and that was really cool to sort of feel that it was opening up opportunity that I'd never considered because I hadn't even thought about having done this before, and suddenly it just sort of opened a lot, and so it was pretty cool. And then it kind of led to a lot of the different projects I ended up doing just like throughout my 20s, and it was, yeah, it really really
You
was
just
important and still is important to me. Like still just running throw, not running. There's a whole collective that makes it sound like I'm the one doing it, but being a part of it. Yeah.
you still really like that connection.
Yeah.
I think that's cool. The performance art thing is it's kind of got like a unanimous chaos to it
Yeah.
across the board, and that's one of the things I really enjoy about it, about just like being able to perform and do your thing, because it's like you got to really find who you are and be able to speak to it, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know, it's almost like a form of religion, right? That's kind of what you were talking about before too. Is that like essentially you were describing to me is that any form of consciousness that has like a perception, has any kind of a perspective, even is automatically like a type of religion. Is kind of what I grasped from
Right.
some of what you were saying, because essentially, your experience is limited to, you being trapped in behind these eyes, and when you as soon as you experience something, like even something good, like you get a signal when you walk out across the street, or like you get some guy high fives you when he bikes by or some shit, just like it's like, oh
Does
shit.
that happen?
I mean, I really want to, but I don't think it ever has. That's what I'm talking about, though. That'd be a moment for me where I was like, man, God was there for me. Like I would think of like
Somebody do this for Alex.
like a higher power. I would think of a higher power right at that point when I was like, oh shit, that guy just like laid it on me, right? And I was ready for it for some reason, right? Our two paths aligned. And I guess what you were describing is like even that can be like a form of religion, like
Yeah. Well, it's from watching Interstellar yesterday. Yeah.
spoiler alert on Interstellar.
Yeah.
if
All
you guys
kinds of spoiler.
if you guys
Yeah.
haven't seen it yet,
Well, go see it.
yeah, what the fuck, like. So you were saying you were because I basically like I kind of forced you to watch this movie.
Yeah, you did.
And not a lot of people actually can sit through that whole movie. I think there's a
It was worth it.
I think there's a large population that hasn't seen like the whole thing, and they just it doesn't matter. So
Yeah, no, it got me thinking. I'm gonna read a quote because it got me thinking of well, two different authors. Simone Weil, who's like early 20th century philosopher, and like I okay, I feel like I should give like some synopsis of the movie in some way to kind of like frame all this. Um, so we got Matthew McConaughey.
oh, the grumbler.
and
Murph.
and Matthew McConaughey has got to go out through this wormhole because there might be possibly like habitable life going through the wormhole to like wherever the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the important part to that is that there's a wormhole. That's
Yes,
the big one.
there is a wormhole. That's the major thing. Anyway, but he has to leave his daughter, and so it's incredibly sad and difficult, and so there's this strain um, of not knowing if he'll come back or be with the people he loves again, and then when they end up on through this wormhole trying to see if any of the planets were
a bunch of normal human chaos ensues.
Yeah, human chaos ensues.
On the other side of the wormhole.
But the weird shit is that like on some of the planets, it's like, oh, if you're down there for like a minute, it's like 3 Earth years type thing.
So you're talking about time dilation. Right?
Yeah,
the movie uses a theory, or I guess a concept called time dilation, where when you're closer to a gravitational mass, your clock ticks slower. We have evidence that it's true. Everything that we know about the math says that it's true as well.
About the maths.
Well, Einstein's theory of relativity. I haven't never really written any of that stuff down or like really worked that out, but
work that out.
Yeah, I mean,
just
you can
sat down
discover.
and done a bit of Einsteining.
Well, you can sit down and discover if Einstein was right. Like you
Yeah.
can work the numbers out if you really are determined. But I don't have that determination. I just trust I trust most people.
Just take his word for it.
There's a couple of people who believe Einstein at least, and I think
I'll consider it.
Is solid.
Yeah.
2 or 3 is solid. You
But-
can
but-
convince me of anything at that point.
This movie.
The Interstellar.
So, shit gets really cool and weird when so Matthew McConaughey is so
Right
everybody
next
dies.
to, and eventually,
Yeah, he's
spoiler alert,
goes into a
in
black
the
hole
black hole. Holy
and
fuck.
enters 5-dimensional space. In which like
I like how
he
you
can.
say it like you just know exactly. Like it's such but yeah, like it's accurate. You're right. So far.
That's what happened, right?
Yeah, it's just like a chill. Yeah, he went into the 5th dimension. It was alright.
As
It
one
was
does,
pretty
just casually. Anyway, but so
chill.
he's
He discovers the 5th dimension and simultaneously goes into it.
and so he can access. He's able to access. Sorry, hi Oli, later Oli. Okay, he's able to access, basically, these different sort of like time portals, and so going back, his daughter when she was a kid would be like, "There's a ghost in the house, Daddy. There's a ghost."
Murph,
Anyway, yeah.
Murph's ghost.
Murph ghost.
Murph.
Don't make me leave like that, Murph.
Don't make me leave like this, Murph.
That's also, you gotta listen through that the whole movie, so it's a little painful. But other than that, I just don't like Matthew McConaughey. It was a great movie. Anyway, so he's Murph's ghost, and so all the time when she was like, "Oh, there's like meaning coming through my bookshelf and all this," and like in Morse code, it was her dad trying to communicate with her. And so ultimately, this succeeds, and she, he's able to convey these messages to her.
He communicates to her through the 5th dimension.
Yeah.
Right after he discovers it, he's just like, "Oh, this is how it works," and suddenly he is the ghost.
It's pretty impressive for Matthew McConaughey.
I guess the thing that I always wondered about for anybody that actually has seen the movie is if she was like growing up trying to figure out that ghost the whole time, right? She got to the same age as him before she discovered that it was actually...
Yeah, so she's his age when she figures it out and is like, "Oh my god, that was my dad the whole time." And then she's like on her deathbed before he physically comes out of the black hole and is able to be like transported back into
I feel like she should have
all
come up
that.
with that way sooner, like she should have had that feeling.
She should have
Like,
figured it out.
and I
She
feel-
should have just
Well, no,
been
I
on the
just- no, I
ball.
just think about, okay, well, think
Oh,
about
it's
it.
the 5th
Like,
dimension,
she
of
was
course.
already pretty onto it. Like she was already pretty onto it when he was initially leaving, right? She had the word "stay" out of it. She was like working out like there was actually something going on, right?
I mean, but
How many more years did it take her to?
but it's not exactly
I guess she
intuitive
did
knowledge.
I guess she
That
did
is.
kind of write off her dad also, so she wouldn't exactly be.
Yeah,
helpful
there
for him
was
as
some
a
emotional
ghost.
strife that I think she was
That was
working
kind of the part
through.
that confused me though, because I was like, I feel like she was probably could have been on top of that a little better, Like,
It's all Murph's fucking fault. The movie could have ended
sakes, Murph.
sooner. It could have all just. He could have come back and just. Fucking
no,
Murph.
Murph was cool.
But anyway, watching that
Murphy's
movie.
Law, though, I wanted to talk about.
Oh
because
yeah.
I started to derail you so many times.
I'm
but
like so excited about talking about these
I know,
books
we're,
too.
We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there.
Okay.
But the Murphy's Law thing is something that I don't know. I kind of have beef with. I'm not a scientist at all. Like I said, I barely can even read. But it's like
I love how you like talk about your illiteracy with such pride. You're like,
it's not.
I can barely read.
Well, I mean, what am I supposed to
Let's
do?
talk about quantum
I'm
physics.
not just gonna start reading. No, I guess Murphy's Law. Yeah, that's
Anyway.
kind of what it leads into. But I think it's just like it's a wrong thing to call a law. We're gonna stop calling shit laws. That's all.
It's not a law. It's like a platitude.
It's like a thought. Yeah,
It's just a
fucking idea.
platitude. It's just a.
I mean, I guess it's as much of a law as relativity is a law. But I mean, relativity seems to make a lot more sense.
Yeah, no.
guess.
Murphy's Law is more. Yeah, it's a. I would just say platitude.
Murph,
Yeah.
don't make me leave like this, Murph. Murph. I fucking love that.
This should just be a podcast
can't-
of just like
that scene
being
is
Matthew
supposed to be-
McConaughey.
It's supposed to be so emotional. And I
Murph.
can't take it seriously at all anymore. It's just I don't Murph.
It's just his fucking face.
Don't make me leave like this, Murph.
Like a Wookie.
Oh man.
but I was thinking about these books after watching that movie.
Yeah, so you were the reason why you were thinking about those books essentially is that they relate like a perceptual experience of like
Yeah.
gravity or like they relate this idea that I don't know, it's kind of been in the back of my head for a bit of like everything at its core is like a wave. Everything
Yeah.
is a fluctuation.
And sort of the one of the things that the movie really pointed to was that things like time and space, that basically sort of that like materiality in itself was just like a perception. Um, anyway, and so I got thinking of Simone Weil, who wrote Gravity and Grace. Um, and the
Simone
premise of
Gray.
Simone Weil,
Vey.
yeah, French name, and also Chris Kraus, who was really influenced by Simone Weil, who wrote Aliens and Anorexia, and that's what I'm gonna quote.
Aliens and anorexia, you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I swear to God, this is all connected to.
To Interstellar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, but this quote was one. This isn't from either of those books, but it's a Chris Kraus quote, but it relates to this idea of what I really liked about the movie too was the really interesting attitude about like love and connection between bodies, that uh, the idea that people are united to each other despite materiality. Um, and Chris Kraus writes a lot about that, and so does Simone Weil in terms of these ideas of like radical altruism.
You're talking about like an underlying connection that everybody shares, essentially.
Yeah,
And if you can, if you could tap into it, then there's something, to get you there.
yeah, and like there's that quote in the movie like where Anne Hathaway, she's in love with Anne Hathaway's also in the movie. You know that.
Woo!
Yeah, and she.
Spoiler alert! There's a Matthew McConaughey, or no, who's that?
Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway.
No, not Anne Hathaway. The other guy, Matt. There's a Matt Damon cameo. That's
There is a Matt Damon cameo too. But Anne Hathaway's character, like at one point, talks about she's in love with one of the guys who like went on one of these missions to one of the planets, and she's all like tearful and like, oh, like isn't this is a bad paraphrase? Isn't love the only thing that transcends space and time? Like if somebody's dead, like there's no like reproductive practical thing to it. It's just human connection.
So McConaughey's argument is something along the lines of
Human utility.
love is a social utility.
Fucking said just like a man. um, but 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 I was really into like that bit because I feel like that was like an ongoing theme throughout the movie, especially with like Matthew McConaughey's connection to his daughter, like this idea of like human connection being transcending this sort of like material, like even these things like time, like his daughter, being like on her deathbed and him returning to her. And it reminded me of this quote, which is sort of about the idea that like the boundaries between people, um I'll just say the quote. She says it better than me. So no one can live in a heightened state of reflective receptivity forever. Because this empathy is entirely involuntary, there's a terror here, a loss of control, and a seepage. Becoming somebody else, or worse, just becoming nothing but the vibratory field between two people. That's it.
I could go on that.
Do you think it at all relates to the movie? I don't know. That's what I thought of. But
kind of, I mean, it kind of got a little wordy for me, I guess.
Okay.
I got a little
maybe
lost
it's
in it.
okay.
But like essentially, she was just talking about an underlying connection, like a just something deeper that you can get emotionally, right? Like
Yeah, and it's similar to what Simone Weil. Like Simone Weil talks a lot about decreation, which for her was a more religious idea, but it was the idea that to be the best human you possibly can be, become less of a body, like become like as unmaterial as you can be, and then that's what makes you able to like love people better, be connected, have a sense of unity and complete altruism for all humanity. If you're like utterly
so I guess
unmaterial.
So I guess my thought would be like when you really break it down to it,
Yeah.
there is really only material. The only thing that we can like measure is material. So when you're talking about having something like healthy skin or something like I don't know, like a
What a good example of materiality.
right. It
Good skin,
well, that's I mean
clear skin.
it is okay. It is like because it's
It's like a
superficial
Neutrogena
by
ad.
nature. It's it's superficial.
Yeah.
And also it just feels like it's one of those things that doesn't like it can't be thought of without like a material
Yeah,
reality.
like
So like
quantifiable.
essentially what I'm
Yeah.
kind of not trying, what I'm not really understanding do with the quote is like what if like if you're dead, then that's the most pure state that you could be in if in like a just a
According to like Simone Weil.
where
Yeah.
you don't where you if you don't have any bias towards your own like molecular existence, then you're not a consciousness. But what I understand from the movie is that there's frequencies that we're not engaging with in the background, right? That we can't pick up. So we can't pick up gravity. We can't pick up, dark energy, dark matter,
Yeah.
and uh, that is where those nuanced conscious wavelengths hang out, if you will.
Hang out.
Yeah, it's a pretty silly thought,
Just chilling.
but it's I mean that's wavelengths just hang out in sections. Reds in an area, purples in an area. It's just
How segregated.
it is. I really wish we could just all unite and be just one wavelength, but the universe is more complicated than that. So yeah, like I just know what do you think of when I start saying the kind of like I feel like she's missing the idea of that underlying frequency,
I think you should understand that to be like the most authentic form of being though, and the idea of being in a body to be inauthentic.
Mm.
And well, it's like that earlier
See,
I
that's where I
mentioned
would have
the
to differ because she's
really
putting. Well, that's kind of what you were talking about with like putting any kind of form of religion or like a bias, right? She's putting this idea of authenticity
right.
on something, right? Like whether something is real or not real based on a judgment call, right?
Hmm.
And I feel like it's a flawed piece of it, isn't it? Like, is that do you think?
I don't know. I mean, I think the body does cloud things. The fact that you can only ever, all of us can only ever be in our own brains. We can
Mm.
only ever be in our own, like, by interacting with anything, we taint it.
Yeah,
And
it's like the double slit experiment thing, where as soon as you
yeah,
measure something,
you've interacted with
you've
it.
changed the outcome actually.
Yeah. And so I think for her, and that's kind of a funny. It's interesting in that that is sort of a like a parallel idea in both science and philosophy.
So,
In that in science, the idea of like interacting with something taints it, but also in this philosophical idea, interacting with
so this is kind of a cool idea.
yeah,
What I've understood is like that essentially what she feels is that the existence of a body in a superposition, an actual superposition where you're two things at the same time, or like all the options at the same time, is a truly authentic body, right?
what do you mean by all the options?
All the options is in so like the reason why we have like the idea of superposition is like electrons or electrons and their spins. So electrons are essentially like clouds in real life, and they're not really a thing. And when as soon as you look at it, the electron chooses to be in a place. Well, I mean, more or less, you manifest that electron to be in a place at a time with a certain spin. But
Mm-hmm.
there's a law that states that you can't know the spin and the velocity of an electron just at all because of like the theories of Schrodinger and just
Right.
how things are.
You would have to come in like contact would have
So
to occur.
so until you measure that electron, it's in a state of what's called superposition. It's just a cloud of
I've never
chaos.
heard that term.
Superposition, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a quantum physics term. Woo-hoo-hoo.
Look at you, Mr. Illiterate.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty schmert.
That was like the one book I did read. It was just a book on quantum physics. It's so silly of me because it just like fucked with my reality. It was just like I don't know what is real. Like you read like a little bit on quantum physics and
Yeah.
you'd just be ruined. But yeah, the state of superposition is her idea of authenticity. Is
That's an interesting, like, yeah, without knowing much about quantum physics, that sounds like a really interesting parallel.
So
Um,
here's the part where
or to even take it a step further, just to like backpack on that. Uh, like for Plato, that would be the world of ideals, would be sort of like an interesting equivalent to the superposition. Like the idea, like the world of ideas, basically, in which everything is sort of in its most
chaotic state. It's not really, you can't really grasp it. It's
in
all
its
kind of
most yeah in its
cloudy.
most ideal form, and so it's like it's interesting that both science and philosophy have kind of this interesting. It's interesting that like in these very different fields, there's a parallel idea
Yeah.
that is yeah, that
But
you maybe wouldn't suspect to appear in both.
so then I guess the next thought would be after acknowledging that essentially a superposition is the true authenticity of consciousness. I would argue that consciousness itself breaks that chaos, breaks so you manifest that position by being alive. So the choices that you're making every day just because of your
Right.
consciousness, because you're disconnected from these background wavelengths.
Yeah.
It's like there's a reason why we're disconnected, but we have this feeling that they're still like there. We have this like
Oh yeah,
emotional.
that makes sense because like consciousness when we at least when like what I think you're saying, like consciousness can only exist inside the mind, right? Like it's a phenomenon that like without this whole bucket of meat,
I
there's no
think
consciousness,
there's
right?
like a. I agree completely.
It's like y'all perverts just taking photos of me while I'm just
That's it, and
pooping out my black
it's
hole.
just trying to be it's just trying to be itself at the center of our galaxy, and
Uh,
we went and fucking creeped all over it.
I know, we're just like peeking over the bathroom stall at the poor thing.
Yeah, it's creepy. We're creepers. We're the
We're
creepers
just
of the universe.
fucking pervs.
Yeah,
That's what we are.
that was the other one that I kind of liked that we talked about pretty quickly too. Is this idea that like our version of consciousness is the best one.
Well, that's an, like yeah. I was gonna run with what you're saying there because like it's an extremely new idea. Like consciousness is new. It's not, and it's also extremely like it's not an ahistorical idea.
Mm.
Um, I mean, if we're gonna, I could take this in a cool social justice direction.
Wow, that was
uh,
all right.
but if we,
If you want,
but
it sounded a
it's
lot creepier
applicable.
when you said it.
I mean, if I want to add to the barrage of like social justice talk that already is the internet, but like, um, but no, but it is applicable to that in that like part of like movements like feminism and civil rights movement will point to the fact that ways of dehumanizing other people have been through having people in positions of more dominance like claiming like oh they don't have consciousness so we're allowed to enact this degree of authoritarian rule over whomever. So consciousness is obviously like a very historical and like contingent on who's making the claim. Like
On the
it's
experience, the way like history is written by the winners, kind of thing.
yeah, yeah.
Just because you're
It's
the one that's experiencing it, it's you're biased.
yeah, it's completely historically contingent. Like, you know, who knows? Like 100 years from now, we could all be like, oh, the dolphins and puppies are on the same plane as us. Like, it's not as if this is just sort of an ahistorical thing that like, oh, humans have this consciousness. Like, it's these are all like categorically flexible.
Yeah.
So as long as we talk about consciousness, we kind of have to just work within this sort of like floppy idea that we're juggling these days, which is one that has changed before and likely will change again, and is usually just in relation to what the group who's talking about it thinks it is.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So what I think I was getting to with that was sort of like
we
a
started. We started. Yeah, we started on gravity. Really.
we started on gravity. Now we're into like philosophy of mind. This is
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we're kind of talking all along the same fence. Like it's just
Yeah.
essentially this fence of like, is there something else happening here that we're not seeing or not really? Is it, like that's really all she's working with.
I
Right?
need a hit of your
Yeah.
bong to answer this better.
You want okay? Well, I mean, I don't. It's not really a question. I just like. I'm just keeping this complicated conversation going. I mean, is that what you would think that she's working with, like this
Chris Kraus or Simone Weil?
Simone? Yeah.
Um, I think I think it was similar to what she was working with. Yeah, I think for her, the religious component was a major aspect of it, though. I don't think her thinking would have worked without the religious component. I think like with Chris Kraus, you kind of get like almost a more like secularized view of Simone Weil. She writes really interesting things about sort of similarly about decreation and about how the body is that the limiting or excess of the body is something that can be mitigated very deliberately, and that by say like decreating oneself, that that can be an act of altruism, or like she has a lot of weird like analogies that she uses for it. She kind of gets way out there, but that's like a whole yeah.
Do you find that the idea of decreating yourself kind of implies that you created yourself?
Well, for Vey, the whole idea was like God created you and wants you to return to your original state, which is like to be decreated. So with her, it definitely had like the connotation of like God as creator. Uh, with Chris Kraus, it was really different. There's no sort of implication of like having created oneself, but it was more like decreation in terms of just like bizarre feminist artistic practice. Uh, this is gonna take it so far away from talking about space and Interstellar if I
We
go on
started
to
on
it.
that. That's all right. I'm through that.
Yeah, that's
I mean, we
okay.
can go back to it at any time. If it's
Yeah.
relevant, just say what you were saying.
With Chris Kraus, she takes the idea of decreation and sort of the ability to find or to strengthen the bond between bodies, like that kind of like link. Um, she uses the idea of anorexia as an example, where she was like, why is it that we always perceive anorexia as being related to like, narcissistic teenage girls as opposed to people who
I mean,
in
Gandhi starved himself too.
yeah, and she was like, well, and she sort of makes a gender analysis based on that. She was like, when men do something, we perceive it as for, metaphysical reasons. When women do something, they're like starving for attention. And so there's this interesting idea of like decreation can be something metaphysical. She takes it into like BDSM and stuff too. Like she gets really weird with it.
Wow.
She's like, yeah. So definitely not with the same like religious connotation that Simone Weil had. Um, but definitely still like it really still reminded me of Interstellar in that way in terms of like being about um connection between bodies and consciousness is what was really essential to both of their thinking. Yeah.
And would you, I mean, would you rather live in the collective consciousness or in a singular consciousness?
Do I like get to choose?
That's the thing.
Is this like
You
on a
don't really.
government forum
Yeah,
somewhere?
you don't really get to, right?
I get to like
I'm part of the collective. I identify as being part of the collective consciousness, and I don't think you should talk with me like
that
that.
sounds like pretty like some Maoist shit going on here. Part of the collective, one of us.
Yeah, it's a cult. It's a cult. I'm starting it.
Yeah.
Come join my quantum cult. I've got science-ish things to say. They sound ish true.
This is persuasive.
And I guess it's strange that consciousness can breed just such these, just intense ideas that drive people's meaning, that drive people to burn down fucking churches
Hmm.
or just it's crazy. The black metal shit is insane. I think that's nuts.
Black metal.
Black metal is a fucked up thing. That's what I was talking about burning. I mentioned burning down churches, right? Like it's a practiced religion of theirs. Because if you're gonna define religion like
I
that,
don't know about this.
black metal. You don't know about black metal?
Like I've heard of it. I just kind of thought it was like one of the subgenres of metal. I didn't know that it had any connection to church burning of any
Yeah,
kind.
I guess it's the subgenre of metal that was like really mad all the time, like extra mad. Like people in metal are
Super duper mad.
so mad. Like they're really mad at like Christianity in particular. It has like Norwegian roots and like Finnish
I
roots.
definitely know about this. Like I've definitely seen like metal aesthetic, which like is
And
usually really hilarious and like we're so Nordic. Look at us grown men with
yeah,
beards and
it's
like
highly Nordic,
uh,
and it's their common practice, or I guess not common, but like they've been known to burn churches, and messed up, and they just keep pushing that idea, like literally like album covers with burning churches on them, just like, all right, I don't really think we should encourage this behavior, you know. It
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
seem like a like yeah, hate religion, but like understand that you're also like making your own, right? Like you're just starting a really fucked up version of religion that only exists like meta because of another religion.
I feel like I'm just like should be more surprised that this subculture exists, but I'm just not. It's
Yeah.
just it's just like, of course there's some fucking dudes running around in kilts burning churches. Of course that's what our world is up to these days.
Yeah.
Of course this is all just
It's a strange one, and
uh,
I'm not really even sure like what to do with it at this point. All we can do is kind of try and have like keep having fun, you know. As long as I'm having fun, I seem to be pretty okay.
yeah.
It's only when I stop having fun, I'm just like, fuck, this
Yeah.
kind of sucks. maybe that collective consciousness is a little better than it sounds, or sounds better than
Join
it is.
Alex's cult.
Yeah, guys. It'll be collectiveconsciousness.com. Check it out. I'm running it now. Donate to our Kickstarter. We'll send you a pamphlet on how to do the double slit experiment yourself.
And a gift bag in the mail.
Yeah. And hopefully
containing the Holy Bible.
hopefully you'll all follow me, and we'll all kill ourselves together someday.
Oh gosh, this took a
Well,
turn.
no, that's the point of a cult, isn't it? Pretty much.
Does it have to be? Is it mandatory?
I mean, you reach that conclusion pretty quickly when you're working with like extreme.
Is it on like the contract sheet for when you join a cult? Like,
I think if it was,
get
it
your
would,
suicide gear in order.
Scientology is next. I'm telling you for sure.
Oh,
They are.
I saw. Do you know what's her name? Leah Raminas. She was in like King of Queens or whatever. She did a good documentary about Scientology. She's rightly pissed off because she was like super brainwashed and did this. Yeah,
She did a couple of podcasts.
yeah.
And,
She's also hilarious. Like I like hearing about somebody being a survivor of a cult who's also funny as fuck. It makes the whole thing.
She's
a
very
little
funny, and
yeah.
She's also very blunt and honest. And
Yeah.
that's probably what she struggled with the Scientology basis.
Right.
Because it's pretty much all completely fictional. Like literally, imagine if we found out that the guy who wrote the Bible was like the best fiction writer, or like a prolific fiction writer. The only thing he was ever known for was making up stories. And oh wait, but he wrote this one true one. Like
it's like if J.K. Rowling was I don't know, but I mean, what sort of? But it's
something to sell fucking J.K. Rowling. That's a ridiculous point.
Were you ever a Potterhead?
No, no, I was never a Potterhead.
Oh right, you're illiterate.
Like recently, J.K.
My bad.
Rowling. Yeah, no, I didn't read any of the books. Actually, the funny thing with me about Harry Potter is I watched all 7 movies, left the last movie, and I would never want to find out what happens at all.
Oh really?
It just doesn't matter to me.
So zero curiosity.
I just don't. I'm just like, it seems like it'd be worth it to build this whole series up.
What if at the end is like, and they all die except Hagrid or something?
Which would be great, you know. Awesome. The weird part is that with J.K. Rowling, what she's doing now is she's coming back and saying that characters were gay when they weren't written.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like obvious that they were gay. Like sure, like if you're gonna make the character choice, like you know, make it the character choice, right? But like,
I know.
you can't really come like, oh, by the way.
It's kind of great though. Like, yeah, it's yeah.
Didn't she say
Dumbledore was gay all along.
Yeah, Dumbledore, I can understand. Like, you didn't. He was more asexual, I guess.
And like, wasn't there something really bizarre? Like, and Hagrid has ADHD, or like, I could be making that up, but there was something really.
I didn't quite get what she was going for.
There's
it
like,
make a lot of sense. To
yeah.
me. And I just that's one of those.
She's just trying to keep up with the millennial world.
That's it.
Let's
That's
be
one of
real.
those that I think she made because she was reacting to the chaos that is our social environment.
Yeah, yeah. She was like, this is, what the kids care about.
Oh, and it just slapped her in the face. Oh my god, that was amazing. People hated Harry Potter so quick. I mean, it was pretty easy.
Yeah,
to
I
hate
still
Harry
love
Potter,
it.
But yeah, she tripped and fell on that one.
But like thinking back about Scientology, I do get how, like, I get how a lot of people could end up in that situation. Because, like...
Looking for a source or a leader.
Yeah, because, like, not even a leader per se, but I think everybody at some point in their life feels really fucked up and feels like everything's shitty. I'm not doing well. What the fuck am I doing? Everybody hates me, etc. And I think having somebody in any capacity, even if they're like playing with a machine, being like, oh, because what is they do? They figure out your photons or whatever in Scientology to like, they try to see how the degree of negativity in your life by figuring out your
Yeah, it's
photons.
essentially an ammeter that just reads the
Yeah.
chaotic current that's coming out of your heart.
But think if for somebody that's like the first time in their life that they ever felt listened to,
Yeah.
like psychologically, I can see how people end up in that shit.
Yeah, I feel like I just wish that people would look into more shit, like, and just know, like, okay, why, like, just stop being so medieval about shit, and just believing that stuff is magic, like the way people treat technology
But it's
sometimes.
called Scientology. Like,
Yeah,
like that's the whole gimmick. Is like, see, it's based in us.
No, but I guess what I'm saying is we're only ever like fully duped when we just don't understand something and somebody really leans it hard against us. Like with that type of an instrument or whatever instrument, if you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that makes it believable is not understanding what it's doing. Right? There's a curtain of magic.
And also, like a very confident person, giving the impression that they know exactly what it's doing.
Yeah.
Like, like
David McCavish.
yeah, like I feel sympathetic
McTavish?
to like McTavish, who apparently like abuses the fuck out of people.
Oh, his wife's like locked up.
Yeah, like apparently he's just running around like beating everybody.
Her dad is trying to get a hold of her and he can't.
Yeah, and like I guess whenever people have spoken up, being like, 'cause he's just beats all these people, like not even just like in his immediate family, and people try to speak up about it, and they all get like slandered and like followed, and it's just bizarre.
So yeah, join collective consciousness. It's gonna be
It'll be a real fun
powerful
time.
We're gonna take on Scientology.
There'll be Kool-Aid.
We're gonna trying to get tax breaks just like them. That's the only thing floating that religion is the fucking billions of dollars that they funnel into it tax free.
Well, but it's really smart. They get a lot of rich people as well as their congregants.
It's mostly rich people because of the fact that they target rich people.
Yeah. And like
target rich idiots.
But I wouldn't like I don't know. I think I feel more sympathetic towards like I wouldn't call them idiots. I'd call it like people who like haven't you ever believed something stupid when you're just like life is shitty and somebody just says something hopeful?
Yes. Yes, I definitely have. You get caught in a pyramid scheme every now and then, and you're just like, oh shit, well, can't do that anymore. So I guess if you have to learn those lessons once or twice. I just feel like, I feel like people should have a couple of red flags in their back pocket, and you start seeing shit like, give us more money, or
David McTavish just walking around like throwing bricks at everyone.
Yeah, toss a red flag, just toss it straight up in the air and fucking run fast because they're powerful. They took on the IRS.
Did they really?
Yeah, that's the only reason why they're tax free is because they took on the IRS in a court case.
Oh, I didn't know that it was such a.
It was a giant fucking federal
ordeal.
Court case, and it took years, and they fucking won, and now they're just tax free forever, and it's just like, what the fuck? So it's
weird.
It's a messy spot to be in, that fucking Scientology. You don't want to get trapped in shit like that.
No.
And the only way you do
just Alex's collective consciousness cult.
Yeah, join collective consciousness cult. Join now. But
like a subscribe button that just pops up when you say that.
It's coming soon. Coming soon to
subscribe now.
YouTube page near you. Subscribe to Collective Consciousness. Join now. I guess that's just kind of what brings us back, this idea of consciousness, to fucking Interstellar. That's the movie that kind of inspired you to chat or even check these authors out. Is that the only quote you wanted to read, or you have more?
I have like a fuck ton more.
Yeah, you were talking about the one that had to do with gravity and how gravity could be a form of communication. And I think we could talk about time dilation.
We could talk about a lot of stuff.
So time dilation.
I know, like
I guess we did kind of mention it.
We touched on it when we were talking about the details. Yeah, I just want to read quotes now that relate to this movie. Like for
All right.
me, like especially the thought of like I thought a lot during it.
Can I read? Can I read the quote while you take a little bong talk, if you want one?
Yeah.
There's
Here, read this one from Chris Cross, Aliens and Anorexia.
it's under the table.
It's just hiding.
So this is Chris Kraus
Yeah.
from Aliens and Anorexia. I thought it was Aliens in Anorexia. Like they were
Oh,
like they were
like
going
anorexic
through it.
aliens.
Yeah, like they're just, that's why they're skinny all
That's
the
not a
time.
bad title either.
All right, Chris Kraus. The panic of altruism, sadness rests inside the body always.
No, 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 no. Wait, is that the one I gave you?
Nascent. Yeah, I think so. Maybe this
Hold
one.
up.
You didn't have the. I mean, it seemed like it was going strong.
Oh, yeah, sorry. That is the right one.
Okay.
Yeah, the panic of altruism.
Panic of altruism, sadness rests inside the body always. Nascent, like the inflammation of a chronic disease. Therefore, empathy is not reaching outward. It's a loop. Because there isn't any separation anymore between what you are and what you see. The panic of altruism.
Yeah. What do you think of?
Sadness rests inside the body always. I'm trying to understand kind of what he means by that. Like, I understand sadness rests inside the body always. It's like the thing you're always trying to beat.
Sorry.
But
Knocking everything over.
altruism is like what exactly is altruism again? This is me not reading.
This will just become like definitions. Like just like
Essentially.
yeah. Altruism is sort of indiscriminate love. Like to be sort of like in love with humanity. The idea like love for all beings. So it's like a so like a lot of scientists say altruism doesn't exist. Like basically it's the opposite of like particular love. So like if I just say like I love this dog, like a particular object, altruism is like all things.
Okay.
Yeah,
Trying
an
to
idea of love for all beings.
right. So vegans don't count because they massacre vegetables on a regular basis.
You taught me that.
Yeah. No.
May I? I couldn't get a good bong hit, but is this acceptable?
Yeah, I guess.
Just this once.
No, not just this once, but not like a lot.
Okay.
But the panic of altruism is nascent, like the inflammation of a chronic disease. But I guess
So it's the idea of like um that there's a panic in being connected to everything. Like you know how you were framing things in terms of collective consciousness? There's a panic in like being restrained to one's own body.
So
Like the fact that you can like I can never see your perspective. We can never see what Oli sees. Like the panic of being simultaneously connected to everything while restrained by skin bag body,
right.
you know.
But then he hits this harder part where he says, therefore empathy is not a reaching outward, it's a loop.
Yeah.
Which is
like a feedback loop.
So when you reach out to other people, you're really only reaching out to yourself.
Or sort of all at once. Like a frequency.
Yeah, yeah. But there's times where you're not always reaching, or it's not even reaching. It's just a loop that you're experiencing. It's kind of what I'm trying to wrap my head around.
Yeah. When I think of it, I think of it always like when I was reading that book in terms of like I almost thought of it musically. Like you know how like when you bring a microphone too close to an amp and the feedback loop starts to happen?
Yes.
That's how I tend to like visualize that.
Right. But that implies like that it would just reach an infinite destruction like
maybe that's what passion is.
The frequency gets so intense that you're going to explode, right? That's Tesla's
That's interesting. I like that. I feel like we just like zoomed into it. Yeah, okay.
So what I'm talking about is
I like that.
It's called a resonant frequency. Right? Everything has a resonant frequency and it wants to vibrate at that frequency. It's the reason why a tuning fork like gives you a solid tone.
Right.
Because literally something that size, shape, and mass, it gives off that frequency.
Yeah.
Which is bizarre to me that that's even a thing.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that w- we can engage with our collective consciousness, join the cult now, is that's a really decent bit. I don't mind that bit at all. The only thing I would like us to do by joining the collective consciousness is to find the resonant frequency of like the universe, right? Of everything, right?
Hmm.
That resonant frequency where you're flowing with it. And I feel like you can. I feel like the hardest part of being a consciousness that's separated from that is trying to stay surfing the frequency, stay on that surf of the resonant frequency all the time. If you fall out of sync, you stop fitting in. You don't.
Hmm.
Nothing quite works as well as it did, right? But if you
Hmm.
are fitting in, everything that needs to happen for you is going to happen because you're right. You're right on the wave with the universe,
That
right?
sounds so Oprah.
Well, I guess I don't think Oprah talked about the universe a lot. I feel like people would take her less seriously.
She's like kind of new agey.
This is I'll take it as a compliment because Oprah's pretty cool, but there's some things I don't like about Oprah. But yeah, so I think our essentially our life, or at least mine, is going to be a never-ending road to just try and stay on the surf of that resonant frequency, right?
Hmm.
That idea that like you could destroy the earth with a big enough like just tapping at the right moment. If you just get a bunch of people to tap, you can send a wave through the earth and back like a swing set, right? That's how a swing set works as resonant frequency, right? You push a swing set far enough and hard enough at the right time and just keep giving it that feedback loop. Eventually, it explodes. Same way that an amp would eventually explode if you just kept letting it feed back on itself.
Hmm.
It's too much,
Yeah.
right? So so that it's that falling in and out of synchronization with the frequency of the universe
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
almost a necessary part of not existing with the collective consciousness. Join now. Join the cult now.
I like that though. I like that. I like the idea of a feedback loop like becoming too much. Um, I think like oh sorry, like it's an interesting thing because like again I feel like there's that parallel in both like science and philosophy. Um, I almost wonder what like the philosophical equivalent of the amp exploding is.
Well, I think kind of what we were talking about with superposition before,
Yeah.
and how if you could get your consciousness to exist in a superposition, then you're completely tapped into the waves of what's happening everywhere, right?
But nobody can do that, right? Like we
Right.
were saying,
Unless
yeah.
you starve yourself, of course, right?
Unless you're Simone Weil
Yeah.
and just yeah.
That's crazy. I can't believe a human
She was a weird
can actually
lady. She was
starve
a pretty
themselves.
weird lady. She was a yeah, fucking weirdo.
That's a different kind of commitment.
Yeah.
I mean, when I want to eat bad enough, there's nothing else that matters. It doesn't. Like, dude could choke to death beside me, and I'd be like, I gotta go eat. I'd have to be really hungry, but like, there's a hunger level that I'd ignore
But I
that.
wonder if that's almost like in a way like sort of her equivalent of the amp exploding is
Mhm.
like by trying to be so connected to all of humanity and so completely empathetic that she could understand every person's suffering everywhere, like so utterly altruistic. Um, Sort of this idea of like her self annihilation in order to like basically the amp exploding, but for her in this very personal and religious way.
I
If you
kind of
feel
see.
me.
I do see what you're saying, but at that point, I feel like it's an argument of like that amp exploding wouldn't matter. That amp exploding didn't experience any pain, right? It was just a feedback loop that destroyed something, right? Like there
You don't
was
know
a.
its
I guess
consciousness.
yeah. I can't say it didn't
Are
experience
you
any
saying it
pain, but
doesn't
like.
feel feelings?
But yeah, I'm saying that we would never be able to experience even anything close to what that amp would have experienced if it blew up, right? Let's say its feelings were hurt. There's no way we'd ever be able to read or communicate or interpret its feelings at all. It was just something that happened to us, right? So with trying to be altruistic about everyone everywhere all at once, feel the pain of the entire world, I feel like all you're doing is a disservice to consciousness.
Huh.
You're trying to find the worst parts of it, right? Instead of trying to surf that wave, you're constantly trying to fall further and further out of sync with that wave of the universe. And
Interesting.
I don't think that's the ride that humans are supposed to be on.
So you're not into the Simone Weil self annihilation. You won't be starving yourself to find
No.
collective consciousness. No, we eat well in Alex's collective
Yeah.
consciousness cult.
Join now. Join. Yeah. We do
There's
potlucks.
pizza.
We
Yeah.
do potlucks every Tuesday. It's
Taco Tuesdays.
it's good shit. It's really good shit. Yeah, it's a good idea. I might start this collective consciousness. I think that's already a thing that exists. It might be like a group already.
Yeah, it sounds like something that'd already be taken. It's too good of a name.
Yeah, and even trying to have like the experience of anything else is like, it's so undoable. You know, like
But
imagine
isn't
what
that what empathy is? Exactly. Like,
yeah, but imagine what the moon goes through, right? Try and figure out what it feels like to orbit something, to be pulled on so hard by something else that like your shape changes.
that was pretty poetic.
Right. I don't know about
Imagine what the moon is feeling.
that. Okay. They're words. They're just words.
It's pretty.
I don't really get the idea of poetry. I don't like what makes that
Pretty
poetic.
shit like that.
It's pretty.
No,
I guess I don't.
I'm
understand.
just making fun of you.
No, I know you are. I guess I don't understand words on a deep enough level to like to appreciate like the prettiness of them, if you will. Like I could never see a bunch of words as like a bouquet of flowers.
But I think you do.
Like
I
you
think
see
you just
Johnny-
don't know that you do because you're a comic. You understand
I
tonality.
understand there's a
You
there's a
you
better
understand.
way to say stuff. A lot of
Yeah,
times.
like you
a
understand.
clearer and a more concise. That's really I guess the beauty that I
That's
would.
totally what it is. Like you understand that a joke is funny because you took a breath or took a pause. Like you understand rhythm and phrasing, which
where
is
you
which is
reveal-
poetry.
Where you reveal certain parts of the sentence.
Yeah, and like or what you don't say that makes
Mhm.
it funnier, like
Mhm.
which is what poetry is. Like if you don't use this word but put like it's phrasing. It's using a sort of particular syntax to create your point
The iambic pentameter.
if you want.
Some of that shit.
Yeah. But like
Oh,
yeah, no, but you
fascinated
understand
by
that. I don't believe that you don't understand words. I've heard you do comedy. You understand words. You understand how words are
Right.
can be structured.
Yeah, I understand that there's better ways to say stuff. That's kind of the way that I've been approaching it, I guess.
Yeah.
Essentially, you take something that you're trying to say, you say it, and then you think, okay, what don't I have to say
You refine
to
it.
get that
Yeah.
across? And it gets better naturally. That just makes them better.
Yeah, that's like what poetry. Yeah, same
Yeah. So
same
I guess
fucking deal. Yeah.
that's me. I'm a poet of laughs.
Yeah.
Ha, ha, ha.
That was hella convincing. But yeah, it's I don't know, poetry's similar. I find anyway, like without being a comic, like I'm just sort of like this is just like my like perspective on the thing that you do.
Mm.
But like I feel like it's a similar idea of like crafting something to reach its highest effect um by omitting things or you know taking beats or yeah,
Yeah.
framing it in such a way that it's most effective.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that you've experienced that too. It's like sometimes it's not that much fun to really break stuff down though. Sometimes like I break stuff down like way better if I'm just like drunk, and and the only reason I'm doing it better is because I'm getting to it quicker.
Mm.
I go straight there, and people like people give a better reaction.
You know what? I find that with poetry too in a weird way.
Mm.
Like, there's somebody who's called like the greatest punk poet, Kathy Acker.
Punk poet.
Yeah,
Yeesh.
but it's sort of no, but it's really cool shit. And I think part of her appeal, it almost like it at points like reads like drunk poetry, is because it's just sort of this like intense, almost like anarchic like flood of words at you, too quick, too fast, all the time. And it's almost the equivalent of like who's that one comic? Who the fuck am I don't know, but it's almost like Eddie Murphy-ish in the way it's done. It's just kind of like tossed at you, and that's almost like to its benefit because it appears uncrafted, and it's almost like the drunk comic. It just you kind of get to it and you're there quickly,
Yeah.
and like yeah, it's similar.
It's an issue I don't want to have too long, so I got to try doing more sober sets.
Uh,
I was pretty sober on Crowd Off, but there was 2 beers, so
which
I
one?
was a little loose. Crowd Off, that was last night.
Oh yeah, that was a good show. That was Yeah.
It's pretty good. I liked it.
It's good heckling. Have you ever LARPed?
No, I kind of for a while I got interested and I thought it could be cool, but then I was like, nah, this isn't gonna work for me. Just doesn't feel right, you know.
Just not a LARPer. I've never LARPed. I briefly played D&D. That's as
Briefly,
far.
so you didn't really commit.
Not really. Yeah, no. I feel like I'm like a tourist nerd. I float into.
A tourist nerd. That's a great description.
Yeah, 'cause I don't like
Sometimes you go down there and play some Pokemon.
like
Every so often you break out and hit some Digimon Central or try and read some anime.
I'll just sort of briefly get into a thing and sort of like know the general gist of like a nerddom, and then I'll kind of drift out again. I don't really I never particularly like commit to a nerddom.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if I have committed to a nerddom either,
Yeah.
but I like space a lot. You seem to have caught on to that thing that they're gonna go discuss the black
Yeah,
hole.
McGill.
I can't believe that's actually gonna happen at McGill. That's so cool.
It is, yeah.
That's like a worldwide thing.
It'll be neat.
Yeah. Is there tickets?
I don't know. Let's check. No.
Well, we can probably check later, but
Yeah.
maybe, I don't know.
I feel like there's probably tickets. It's like it seems like a very like
You think
intense
people would be
and
interested in hearing? How long have we done here?
I don't know.
We're an hour and 7. That's pretty decent.
Yeah.
I mean, we were talking the whole time. There was no like awkward silence, so that was fun.
Kept going. It was good. It was good.
Sweet. We talked about Interstellar. Got into some more complicated shit. Now I just gotta find ways to just chill out like this. Just set this up,
Yeah.
smoke some weed.
Do some more smoking and podcasting.
Yeah. Hopefully,
Joining of cults, creating of cults.
hopefully you guys will be into this. It's that one now. Up on the hanger.
Ah.
Hey, now you see.
Oh, this one.
Yeah. It's
All the
been
cameras.
switching between those two. And it's just something to keep it interesting. I'm trying to figure out how to do this properly.
Yeah, yeah.
I think you've kind of understood what's happening here.
I think so.
Do you have fun?
Yeah, it was neat.
Cool.
It was. Yeah, I feel like I needed to
Seems like-
smoke more weed. I feel like I needed to be a little more high for bits of that.
We'll do some more joints next time. You know, maybe we can take suggestions from any of you guys. And you know, this has been the Wood Survival Guide. And this is a lot more about my survival than you know.
Survival of the collective consciousness.
Oh yeah, I could join the collective consciousness now. Collectiveconsciousness.com.
Get a free sticker.
Thanks, guys.